And Taiwan planning to ramp up defense spending next year to more than 3% of its GDP. In one response, the U.S. pressured to invest more in its own security. At a $31.1 billion US dollars, that would represent a rough 23% hike from this year, and would, for the first time, include funding for Taiwan's Coast Guard, which is engaged increasingly in standoffs with its Chinese counterpart. And more, Victoria Jen joins us live from Taipei. Toni Waterman joins us from Washington, D.C. And let's get first to Victoria. Victoria, Taiwan, as you mentioned, under pressure for a while from the U.S. to increase spending on its own defense, but it is choosing to do so now. What are Taiwan's motivations?
Well, this marks a major shift in Taiwan's defense policy. For the first time since 2009, spending will rise above 3% of GDP. Premier Zhou Rongtai explained that the increase is driven by mounting pressure from China, which has been stepping up its military activity, such as flying warplanes near Taiwan almost daily and holding large-scale war games earlier this year.
这是我们再一次用这样的具体向全世界也向国人展现我们维护国家主权安全跟印太地区稳定安全跟世界共同责任的决心跟能力。
It's also about reassuring allies. Washington has repeatedly urged Taiwan to spend more on its own security, much as it has pushed European countries in NATO. So breaking past that 3% threshold shows Taipei is responding to those calls and is serious about investing in its own defense. The money will go towards ongoing modernization projects, things like the indigenous submarine program, missile upgrades, and asymmetric capabilities that make it harder for China to carry out an invasion. The aim isn't to match Beijing dollar for dollar, but to build credible deterrence by spending smart.
All right, thanks for that, Victoria. Toni, let's bring you in here. Victoria mentioning that Taiwan's this emphasis on asymmetric capabilities because the idea is that it serves as a deterrent, and if there should be any major military response, it might come possibly from the United States. So what Taiwan chooses to do might affect the US's own calculus on how it wants to defend any allies or partners in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, the U.S. position on Taiwan has long been strategic ambiguity, so not committing to a specific response if China were to take action against Taiwan. That was meant to deter really both parties, so Taiwan from declaring independence, but also China from taking the island by force. President Biden was very clear that the U.S. would intervene if China attacked Taiwan. But under President Trump, it's a lot less clear. His ire has really been focused on Taiwan's semiconductor business. He says the island has stole that from the United States, and also on its defense spending. So this potential increase to over 3% could certainly help mollify at least one of those things in part. And it could actually lead to something else that is very important to Donald Trump, and that is business deals. Nearly $4 billion has been earmarked for new fighter jets and boosting Taiwan's naval defenses. It buys most of its fighter jets from the United States. Billions of dollars more are going to be spent on arms purchases from the United States. And even if the naval defenses and domestically built submarines, they often are going to involve U.S. military hardware, training, and technology partnerships. So this could be quite lucrative for U.S. business. And that is really music to the ears of Donald Trump, who has staked a lot of his presidency on this idea of new investments in and also deals with the United States.
Toni, so this bundling together of economic and security concerns, if Taiwan does meet this more than 3% defense spending by next year, this is in fact just a start in terms of Washington's eventual goal. What might this goal be, given that increased spending leads to all sorts of things, including, for example, buying more in terms of munitions and weapons from the United States?
Well, the U.S., at least under President Trump, is very keen to exit this role as the global defender. We've seen something very similar to what's playing out in Taiwan with NATO members as well. Trump and really other presidents in the U.S., both Democrat and Republicans, have been demanding that Europeans spend more on their own defense. The magic number has kind of been this 3% of GDP, but in recent months, we've actually seen this push closer to 5% of GDP for NATO. But Trump is demanding a much, much higher number from Taiwan. He has said that he wants the island to spend 10% of GDP on defense. Most experts say this is something that would be very difficult to accomplish, considering that the U.S. has denied requests by Taipei to buy certain expensive defense equipment. One other thing here to take into consideration is distance. So Trump really sees Taiwan as being quite far away, just physically. And he sees this power asymmetry between the island and China. So he's even less inclined to get involved. And we also have the semiconductor issue still in play here. But major manufacturers, including TSMC, they are investing tens of billions of dollars in the United States right now. So even that aspect is somewhat less of a concern. I think ultimately the U.S. just does not want to be on the hook financially or militarily if something happens, whether that's in Taiwan or something with NATO members.
All right, thanks for that, Tony. Victoria, given what we've just heard from Tony, uncertain that commitment, at least under this current administration, what Taiwan needs to do. We just heard when you ran that soundbite by the Premier Zhuo Rongtai saying this is the first time we've used such concrete numbers to demonstrate how much Taiwan is committed to not just its own security, but the security of its region. So those concrete numbers include mention of how much is going on Taiwan's Coast Guard. Why does that matter?
Yes, for the first time, Taiwan is counting the Coast Guard as part of its overall defense spending. On the surface, it may look like just like an accounting change, but it's actually quite significant. The Coast Guard is often on the front lines of Taiwan's daily tensions with China. Its ships regularly face off against Chinese Coast Guard vessels in the Taiwan Strait and in surrounding waters.
可是我们要因应中共的灰色地带对我们造成的威胁，有的时候在捍卫我们的海疆或保持我们的海上交通线，就是所谓的 SLAC 的时候，不一定是由海军来担任这个任务，所以有时我们必须会去使用海巡署 Coast Guard。那这里的话，其实也是去应对中共它日益成长的中国海警。
By formally bringing the Coast Guard into the defense budget, the government is recognizing that its role goes well beyond law enforcement. In the event of a conflict, the Coast Guard would be folded directly into naval operations. So this move highlights its importance as part of Taiwan's frontline defense. So this reflects a broader approach to national security, where every part of Taiwan's security forces is considered essential to deterrence.
Well, thanks, Victoria Jen in Taipei and Toni Waterman in Washington, D.C. Victoria, of course, laying out for us this next year, Taiwan spending for the first time since 2009 more than 3% of its GDP on its own defense.